The Manhattan skyline pierced the twilight like ancient totems reaching for the heavens, their glass surfaces reflecting the last rays of sunlight in a dance of gold and shadow. Dakota Stone stood before the mirror in his penthouse apartment, adjusting his tie for the third time, a gesture that did little to calm his racing heart. At 32, he had already revolutionized sustainable energy technology with his groundbreaking fusion of traditional knowledge and modern science. But tonight's charity gala at Alpha Industries would put him face to face with the most enigmatic figure in modern business, Masca Rivers. The weight of his grandmother's medicine pouch pressed against his chest beneath his custom-tailored suit, a constant reminder of who he was and where he came from. The ancient leather contained sacred herbs and crystals, passed down through generations of the Nodin bloodline. His grandmother's last words before her passing still haunted him. Our people were guardians of sacred knowledge, little wolf. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. When the time comes, you'll know which ones to unearth. The drive through Manhattan's bustling streets felt surreal, the city's energy pulsing with an unusual intensity that made his skin prickle. The autumn air carried whispers of change, stirring something primitive and ancient in his blood. As his car approached the towering headquarters of Alpha Industries, Dakota couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Not by the security cameras that dotted the building's exterior, but by something older, something that lived in the shadows between worlds. The lobby buzzed with New York's elite, their designer clothes and practiced laughs masking the predatory nature of their networking. Old money mingled with new tech, creating a sophisticated facade that barely concealed the power plays happening beneath the surface. Dakota felt it immediately, something different in the air, an electric current that made his ancestral bloodline sing. The crystal pendant his grandmother had given him grew warm against his skin, a warning he couldn't quite decipher. Mr. Stone! A sharp voice cut through the crowd. Sarah Chen, Alpha Industries head of innovation, approached with calculated grace. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival. Mr. Rivers specifically asked to be notified when you got here. There was something in her tone that set him on edge, a hint of knowledge beyond what she should possess. Her eyes lingered on his chest, where the medicine pouch lay hidden, before she led him to the private elevator that would take them to the penthouse level. The ascent felt like crossing a threshold between worlds. With each floor, the air grew thicker with possibility and danger. The elevator's mirrored walls reflected versions of himself that seemed to shift and change in the corners of his vision. When the doors finally opened to the penthouse level, Dakota stepped into a scene of calculated opulence that took his breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across rare art pieces that spoke of both Western wealth and indigenous heritage. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city below, but it was the man standing alone at the window that commanded Dakota's complete attention. Masca Rivers dominated the space without effort, his presence drawing people like moths to flame. 6'3", with shoulders that spoke of hidden strength beneath his perfectly tailored suit, he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being apex predator in any room. His dark hair held traces of silver at the temples, and when he turned, Dakota felt a jolt of recognition that defied explanation. Mr. Stone? Masca's voice carried easily across the space between them, rich and resonant with unspoken power. Your work in renewable energy has caught my attention, particularly your integration of traditional ecological knowledge with modern technology. He extended his hand, and the moment their palms touched, both men froze. Energy crackled between them, ancient and wild, like lightning seeking ground. Masca's eyes flickered, just for a second, revealing a flash of amber before returning to their usual steel gray. In that instant, Dakota knew he wasn't imagining things. The myths his grandmother had told him, the legends of shapeshifters and sacred pacts, suddenly felt very real. Mr. Rivers, Dakota managed, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Your interest in green technology is well known, though I suspect there's more to your invitation than my latest patents. Please, call me Masca. A smile played at the corners of his mouth, predatory yet intriguing. And you're right, there's much more we need to discuss. Join me in my office? As they moved through the crowd, Dakota caught fragments of whispered conversations that seemed to follow them like shadows. That's him, the last of the Noden bloodline. They say his grandmother was a medicine woman who could walk between worlds. The prophecy speaks of two lines converging when the moon bleeds. The Rivers clan has waited centuries for this moment. Maska's private office was a stark contrast to the party outside, all clean lines and shadows, with artifacts that spoke of both corporate power and ancient wisdom. Native American art pieces shared space with cutting-edge technology, creating a bridge between worlds that mirrored Dakota's own work. Moving to an ornate cabinet that seemed out of place in the modern setting, Maska retrieved an ancient-looking scroll, its edges crumbling with age. The parchment seemed to pulse with its own energy, and Dakota's medicine pouch grew hot against his chest in response. "Tell me, Mr. Stone," Maska's voice had dropped to a near whisper, heavy with the weight of centuries. "How much do you know about your family's history? About the pact made between the Noden and Rivers clans 300 years ago? About the prophecy that binds our bloodlines?" Before Dakota could answer, an explosion rocked the building, shattering the moment along with the floor-to-ceiling windows. Through the broken glass came figures moving with inhuman speed, their eyes glowing with supernatural hunger. Maska's body tensed, and this time there was no hiding the amber glow of his eyes or the way his muscles rippled with barely contained power. "It seems," he growled, his voice deepening to something barely human, "that some secrets refuse to stay buried, and our enemies have been watching longer than I feared." His gaze locked with Dakota's, intense and urgent. "The question is, are you ready to embrace your heritage? Because what happens next will change everything for both our worlds." The world exploded into chaos as Dakota's mind struggled to process the impossible scene unfolding before him. Glass rained down in a deadly shower, reflecting the amber glow of inhuman eyes. The party guests' screams were drowned out by a bone-chilling howl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Maska moved with preternatural speed, placing himself between Dakota and the intruders. "Stay behind me," he growled, his voice a guttural rumble that sent shivers down Dakota's spine. The billionaire's form began to blur, muscles rippling beneath his expensive suit as if something wild and ancient were fighting to break free. Dakota's heart thundered in his chest, his grandmother's stories suddenly taking on new, terrifying meaning. "What's happening?" he managed to ask, his voice barely audible over the din of breaking glass and panicked shouts. "The prophecy," Maska snarled, his features sharpening into something distinctly lupine. "They're here to stop it from coming to pass, to keep our bloodlines from uniting." Before Dakota could question further, the first of the attackers lunged forward, a massive coal-black beast that was neither fully wolf nor fully human. Maska met the charge head-on, his own transformation complete. Where the suave billionaire had stood moments before, a silver-gray wolf the size of a small horse now battled with ferocious intensity. The office became a whirlwind of snapping jaws and slashing claws. Dakota pressed himself against the wall, his mind reeling as he watched Maska, no, the wolf that was Maska, fight with a savagery that both terrified and enthralled him. The medicine pouch around his neck pulsed with heat, and suddenly, Dakota felt a surge of something. Power, knowledge, instinct. Without consciously deciding to move, he found himself diving for the ancient scroll Maska had been about to show him. The parchment seemed to leap into his hands of its own accord, and the moment his fingers touched it, the world around him shifted. Visions flooded his mind. Vast forests untouched by modern civilization, sacred ceremonies performed under a blood moon, and two great wolf packs, one silver, one golden, locked in an ages-old conflict. He saw his own ancestors, the Noden clan, standing as mediators between the warring factions, their power drawn from the earth itself. The roar of the battle snapped Dakota back to the present. Maska had dispatched two of the attackers, but more were pouring in through the shattered windows. The silver wolf's fur was matted with blood, yet he fought on with undiminished ferocity. "The scroll!" Maska's voice somehow reached Dakota's mind, even in his lupine form. "Read it. Only you can unlock its power." Dakota's hands trembled as he unrolled the ancient parchment. The text was written in a language he had never seen before, Yet somehow, he understood every word. As he began to read aloud, his voice took on a resonance that didn't seem entirely his own. When silver moon and golden sun align, two bloodlines fated to intertwine. Earth's power awakens, long concealed. Ancient pacts must be revealed. Guardian's choice to mend or sever decides the fate of worlds forever. The words pulsed with power, and as Dakota spoke them, the air around him began to shimmer. The attackers faltered, their savage expressions turning to ones of confusion and fear. Mosca used the moment of distraction to launch a devastating counterattack, his powerful jaws closing around the throat of the largest assailant. Dakota felt something stirring within him, a wildness that both exhilarated and terrified him. His bones ached with an urge to shift, to change, to become something more than human. But the transformation remained just out of reach, like a word on the tip of his tongue. As the last of the attackers retreated, leaping out of the shattered windows with inhuman agility, Mosca's form blurred once more. In moments, he stood before Dakota as a man again, his suit in tatters, blood streaking his face, but his eyes blazing with triumph and something else. Recognition. You felt it, didn't you? Mosca's voice was hoarse, but filled with an almost reverent awe. The call of your blood, the power of your lineage, Dakota nodded, still struggling to find words. I saw things, our history, the conflict between the packs, but I don't understand. Why me? Why now? Mosca moved closer, his presence both intimidating and magnetic. Because you, Dakota Stone, are the key to everything. The last of the Nodin line, descendants of the great peacemakers who once kept balance between the Silver Wolves of the Rivers clan and the Golden Wolves of the Asina pack. He gestured to the scroll still clutched in Dakota's hands. That prophecy has been guarded by my family for centuries, waiting for the one who could unlock its true power. The one whose blood carries both the gift of transformation and the wisdom of the earth. But I couldn't change, Dakota admitted, feeling a strange mixture of disappointment and relief. Mosca's eyes softened slightly, a hint of the charming billionaire peeking through the battle-hardened warrior. The gift is there, dormant in your blood. It needs to be awakened, nurtured. And I can help you with that, if you're willing. Before Dakota could respond, the door burst open. Sarah Chen rushed in, her perfect composure from earlier shattered. Mr. Rivers, the police are on their way, and the media is already swarming the building. We need to contain this situation. Immediately. Mosca's expression hardened once more into the mask of the ruthless business tycoon. Initiate Protocol Omega. Tell them there was a malfunction in our experimental clean energy system. No one was harmed, and Alpha Industries will cover all damages. Sarah nodded sharply and retreated, already barking orders into her earpiece. Mosca turned back to Dakota, his gaze intense. We don't have much time. You have a choice to make, and it's one that will affect not just your life, but the future of both our worlds. He held out his hand, an echo of their earlier greeting, that now carried the weight of destiny. Come with me. Learn the truth about your heritage, about the power you possess. Help me bring peace to a conflict that has raged for centuries. Dakota hesitated, his mind reeling from the night's events. Everything he thought he knew about himself, about the world, had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. And yet, the pull he felt towards Mosca, towards this new reality, was undeniable. And if I refuse? He asked, needing to know all his options. Mosca's expression grew grave. Then you walk away. Return to your life. Pretend this night never happened. But know that the enemies who attacked us will not stop. They fear the prophecy, fear the change it heralds. They will hunt you, Dakota. And without training, without embracing your true nature, you won't stand a chance. The wail of approaching sirens filled the air, adding urgency to the moment. Dakota looked down at the scroll in his hands, then at the shattered office around them, evidence of a world he never knew existed, yet one that called to the very core of his being. With a deep breath, he made his choice. I'll come with you, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. But I need answers, real answers, not more cryptic prophecies. Maska's smile was both relieved and predatory. "And you shall have them, but not here." He moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a secret elevator. "This will take us to a secure location. From there, we'll travel to a place where I can begin your training, and where we can unravel the full meaning of the prophecy." As they stepped into the elevator, leaving behind the chaos of the shattered office, Dakota felt as though he were leaving behind his old life as well. Whatever lay ahead, he knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The doors slid shut just as the first police officers burst into the penthouse. Dakota's last glimpse was of the New York skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars, a reminder of the human world he was leaving behind, and the mysterious new realm he was about to enter. The secret elevator descended swiftly, carrying Dakota and Maska deep beneath the towering skyscraper. The silence between them was charged with unspoken questions and simmering tension. Dakota's mind raced, trying to process the events of the last hour, the attack, the transformations, the ancient prophecy that somehow centered on him. As they plunged further underground, the sleek metal walls of the elevator gave way to rough-hewn stone. The air grew thick with the scent of earth and something else, a wild primal musk that made Dakota's nostrils flare. His fingers unconsciously tightened around the ancient scroll, its parchment warm against his skin. "Where are we going?" Dakota finally asked, breaking the silence. Maska's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light. "To the heart of my territory, a place where the old ways still hold sway, even in the shadow of the city." The elevator came to a stop, its doors sliding open to reveal a vast underground cavern. Dakota stepped out, his eyes widening in awe. The space before him was a blend of natural wonder and high-tech sophistication. Crystalline formations glowed with bioluminescent light, casting eerie shadows across state-of-the-art computer terminals and holographic displays. "Welcome to the den," Maska said, a hint of pride in his voice. "The command center for my pack and the nexus point for shifter activity on the East Coast." As they moved deeper into the cavern, Dakota noticed others emerging from side tunnels, men and women with the same predatory grace as Maska, their eyes flickering between human colors and lupine amber. They regarded Dakota with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Your pack?" Dakota asked, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. Maska nodded. "The Rivers clan has guarded this territory for generations, long before the first skyscrapers rose above us. We've adapted, evolved, learned to hide in plain sight among the humans. But we've never forgotten our true nature." They approached a circular area at the center of the cavern, where a holographic display flickered to life. Images of bloodlines and territories danced in the air, a complex web of alliances and feuds spanning centuries. "It's time you learned the full truth of your heritage, Dakota," Maska said, his voice taking on a solemn tone. "The history that's been hidden from you, and the destiny that awaits." With a wave of his hand, Maska brought up an image of two great wolf packs, one silver, one gold, locked in eternal conflict. For 1,000 years, the Rivers clan and the Asina pack have been at war, a feud born of betrayal, fueled by generations of hatred and mistrust. The hologram shifted, showing a third group standing between the warring factions. The Nodin, your ancestors, were once the great mediators, shamans and healers who drew power from the earth itself. They maintained the balance, ensuring neither side grew too powerful. Dakota's brow furrowed. But something changed. Maska's expression darkened. 300 years ago, a prophecy was spoken. It foretold the coming of one who would unite the bloodlines, wielding the power of both wolf and earth. The Asina saw this as a threat to their dominance. He paused, pain flashing across his features. They slaughtered the Nodin, trying to prevent the prophecy from coming to pass. The images before them turned violent, showing scenes of battle and devastation. Dakota felt sick, watching as his ancestors fell before the onslaught of golden wolves. But they didn't succeed entirely, Maska continued. A few survivors escaped, hiding among the humans, diluting their bloodline to stay hidden. Your grandmother was the first in generations to show signs of the old power. And now in you, the gift has fully awakened. Takota's head spun with the weight of this revelation. So the attack tonight. The Asina have never stopped hunting, Maska confirmed. They've used their wealth and influence to search for any trace of Nodin blood. When word of your revolutionary work in green energy reached them, they must have suspected. A new figure approached, a woman with sharp features and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Alpha, she said, addressing Maska with deference before turning to Takota. I am Nima, the pack's lorekeeper. There's something you need to see. She led them to a small alcove where an ornate chest sat upon a stone pedestal. With reverence, Nima opened it, revealing a collection of artifacts. A ceremonial dagger, a set of carved bone tokens, and a leather-bound journal that looked centuries old. These belong to your great-great-grandmother, Nima explained, carefully lifting the journal. Aisling Nodin. She was one of the last full-blooded shamans of your line. This is her account of the prophecy and the events that followed. Takota reached for the journal with trembling hands. As his fingers brushed its worn cover, a jolt of energy surged through him. Suddenly he wasn't in the underground den anymore. He was standing in a moonlit forest clearing, watching a scene from the past unfold before him. A woman with long dark hair and eyes that glowed with inner fire stood before a gathered crowd. Her voice rang out, clear and powerful. When the moon bleeds and the earth trembles, two lines shall cross forever entwined. Silver and gold, once foes, now allies, guided by one who walks two worlds. Earth's power awakens, long concealed. Ancient pacts must be revealed. Guardian's choice to mend or sever decides the fate of worlds forever. The vision shifted, showing the aftermath. Arguments breaking out among the gathered shifters. Accusations of treachery, and finally violence erupting as the Golden Wolves turned on the others. Takota gasped as he was yanked back to the present, the journal falling from his grasp. Maska caught him as he stumbled, steadying him with strong hands. What did you see? Maska asked urgently. Takota recounted the vision, his voice shaky. It was Aisling, wasn't it? Giving the prophecy that started all of this? Nima nodded solemnly. The last true seer of the Nodin line. Her words set in motion events that have shaped our world for centuries. But what does it mean? Takota asked, frustration creeping into his voice. How am I supposed to decide the fate of worlds? I can't even shift. Maska's grip on Takota's shoulder tightened reassuringly. That's why I brought you here. To train you, to help you unlock the power that lies dormant in your blood. But more than that, to give you a choice. He gestured around the cavern where members of his pack had gathered, watching the exchange with keen interest. You can walk away from all of this. Go back to your life, pretend this night never happened. We would do our best to protect you, but I won't lie. The Asena would never stop hunting you. Maska's eyes locked with Takota's, intense and earnest. Or you can stay. Learn our ways, embrace your heritage. Help us bring an end to this centuries-old conflict and forge a new future for both shifters and humans. The weight of the decision pressed down on Takota like a physical force. Everything he had worked for, his career, his normal life, it all seemed so distant now, like a dream half remembered. And yet, the pull of this new world, of the power he could feel stirring in his veins, was undeniable. If I stay, Takota said slowly, what exactly am I agreeing to? A hint of a smile played at the corners of Maska's mouth. To become my apprentice. To learn the ways of the shifter, the secrets of your Nodin heritage, and the responsibilities that come with both. It won't be easy. The training will push you to your limits and beyond. But if you succeed, I could fulfill the prophecy, Takota finished, the words feeling strange on his tongue. Nima stepped forward, her expression grave. Or you could destroy us all. The prophecy speaks of a choice, Takota, the power to mend or sever. You must understand the weight of what you're considering. Takota closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He thought of his grandmother, of the stories she told him as a child. He thought of the attack at the gala, of the savage beauty of Maska's transformation. He thought of the vision he'd seen, of Aisling Nodin standing proud and powerful in the moonlight. When he opened his eyes, there was a new determination in his gaze. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll stay. I'll train, whatever it takes to understand this power, and use it to end the conflict." A ripple of excitement passed through the gathered pack members. Maska's smile widened, revealing a hint of fang. "Then let us begin. Your first lesson starts now." He led Dakota to the center of the cavern, where a circular area had been cleared. The pack formed a ring around them, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Shifting is not just a physical transformation," Maska explained, shrugging off his torn jacket. "It's a state of mind, a connection to your primal self. You need to find the wolf within you, Dakota. Feel its power, its hunger, its wild spirit." Dakota nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. As Maska began to guide him through breathing exercises and visualization techniques, he could feel something stirring deep inside him, a presence that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. In the shadows of the cavern, unnoticed by the others, a figure watched with keen interest. Sarah Chen's eyes gleamed with a golden light as she observed the beginning of Dakota's training. She touched her earpiece, whispering softly, "Alpha, the Rivers clan has taken the bait. The Nodin descendant is with them. Shall I proceed with the next phase of the plan?" A deep voice rumbled through the earpiece. "Excellent work, Sarah. Continue to monitor the situation. The time to strike will come soon enough. The prophecy will be fulfilled, but on our terms." As Sarah melted back into the shadows, Dakota stood at the center of the cavern, unaware of the multiple layers of intrigue surrounding him. His journey was just beginning, and the choices that lay ahead would indeed shape the fate of worlds. Days blurred into weeks as Dakota immersed himself in the hidden world of the shifters. The underground den became his new home, a labyrinth of natural caverns and high-tech installations that never ceased to amaze him. Each day brought new challenges, pushing him to the limits of his physical and mental endurance. Maska proved to be a demanding but insightful teacher. His methods were often unorthodox, blending ancient shifter traditions with modern techniques. They spent hours in meditation, connecting with the primal energy that flowed through the earth. Other times they sparred in human form, Maska teaching Dakota to harness his heightened senses even without shifting. "Your body already knows what to do," Maska explained during one particularly grueling session. "It's your mind that's holding you back. You need to let go of your human limitations. Embrace the wolf within." Dakota nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. He could feel the change simmering just beneath his skin, like an itch he couldn't quite scratch. But every time he reached for it, the transformation slipped away. As the weeks passed, Dakota's frustration grew. He excelled in other areas of his training. His connection to the earth was strong, allowing him to sense energies and even influence plant growth in ways that impressed even Nima. But the ability to shift, the core of what it meant to be a werewolf, remained elusive. One evening, after another failed attempt at transformation, Dakota found himself wandering the lesser-used tunnels of the den. His feet carried him to a small grotto he'd never seen before, where a natural spring bubbled up from the rock. The water glowed with an ethereal blue light, casting rippling patterns across the cavern walls. "I was wondering when you'd find this place," a voice said from the shadows. Nima stepped into view, her eyes reflecting the mystical glow of the spring. "This is the heart of the den, a place of great power and ancient magic." Dakota approached the edge of the pool, feeling the energy pulsing from the water. "Why didn't anyone show me this before?" Nima's smile was enigmatic. "Some places must be discovered, not shown. You were meant to find this when you were ready." She gestured to the spring. "The waters here have properties that can open one's mind to hidden truths. Perhaps they can help you overcome the barrier that's preventing your shift." Hesitantly, Dakota knelt by the water's edge. He cupped his hands, bringing the glowing liquid to his lips. The moment it touched his tongue, his senses exploded. The world around him seemed to blur and shift, reality giving way to something more. Suddenly, he was no longer in the grotto. He stood in a vast forest, ancient trees towering above him. The sense of pine and loam filled his nostrils, more vivid than anything he'd ever experienced. He could hear the heartbeats of small animals in the underbrush, feel the pulse of the earth beneath his feet. A rustling in the bushes caught his attention. A massive wolf emerged, its fur shimmering silver in the moonlight. Dakota tensed, ready to run, but something in the wolf's amber eyes stopped him. They were Maska's eyes. The wolf, Maska, approached slowly, its gaze never leaving Dakota's. When it reached him, it pressed its muzzle against Dakota's chest, right over his heart. A jolt of energy passed between them, and suddenly Dakota understood. The wolf wasn't just Maska, it was him. It was a part of him that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged and embraced. He felt his own body begin to change, muscles shifting, senses sharpening even further. For the first time, he didn't fight the transformation. He welcomed it. With a gasp, Dakota found himself back in the grotto, on his hands and knees by the glowing spring. But something was different. He looked down at his hands, watching in awe as fur rippled across his skin, claws extending from his fingertips. "You've done it," Nima breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "You've made the connection." Dakota let out a laugh that turned into a joyous howl as the transformation took hold fully. Where he had knelt, a magnificent wolf now stood, its coat a rich, dark gold that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Moments later, Maska burst into the grotto, his expression a mixture of concern and excitement. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. "Dakota," he asked, approaching slowly. The golden wolf, Dakota, turned to face him, tail wagging slightly. There was recognition in those amber eyes, intelligence and wonder at this new form. Maska's face broke into a wide grin. Without hesitation, he began his own transformation, shifting into the silver wolf Dakota had seen in his vision. The two circled each other, communicating in a language of scent and subtle body language that Dakota somehow instinctively understood. "Well done," Maska's voice echoed in Dakota's mind. "You've taken the first step on a much longer journey." As they made their way back to the main cavern, news of Dakota's successful shift spread rapidly. Pack members gathered to witness the newest wolf among them, many bowing their heads in respect. Dakota could sense a change in the air, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His transformation wasn't just a personal victory, it was the fulfillment of part of the prophecy. Over the next few days, Dakota threw himself into mastering his new abilities. He learned to shift at will, to control the transformation so he could change partially if needed. Maska took him on runs through hidden tunnels that led to secluded forests outside the city, teaching him to hunt, to use his enhanced senses to their fullest potential. But even as Dakota reveled in his newfound power, questions nagged at him. The prophecy spoke of uniting bloodlines, of a choice that could mend or sever. What did it all mean? And why did he sometimes catch members of the pack watching him with a mixture of hope and fear in their eyes? One evening, as Dakota pored over Isling's journal in his quarters, a soft knock at the door interrupted his studies. Sarah Chen entered, her usual crisp demeanor softened by what looked like concern. "How are you holding up?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. "It's a lot to process, I'm sure." Dakota sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's incredible, but overwhelming. There's so much I still don't understand. About the prophecy, about my role in all of this." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "It's a heavy burden, being at the center of such momentous events." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But you should know not everyone here has your best interests at heart." Dakota's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The Rivers clan has its own agenda," Sarah explained. "They've been waiting centuries for someone like you to appear. Someone they can use to tip the balance of power in their favor." "But Maska has been nothing but helpful," Dakota protested. "He's taught me so much." Sarah's smile was sad. "Of course he has. He needs you strong, needs you to trust him implicitly. But have you considered that there might be more to the story? That perhaps the conflict between the Rivers and the Asina isn't as black and white as they've led you to believe?" Dakota felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to dismiss Sarah's words, but something in her tone made him pause. "What are you suggesting?" "Only that you should keep your eyes open," Sarah said, standing to leave. "Question everything. And remember, the prophecy speaks of a choice. Make sure that when the time comes, it's truly your choice to make." As she left, Dakota's mind whirled with new doubts and suspicions. He thought back to his training, to the way information had been carefully doled out. Were there things Maska wasn't telling him? Secrets that could change everything? His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent howl echoing through the den. The sound carried a clear message to Dakota's newly attuned senses. Intruder. Danger. Heart racing, Dakota rushed from his quarters. The main cavern was in chaos, pack members shifting and preparing for battle. Maska stood at the center, barking orders. "The Asina have found us," he growled as Dakota approached. "They're attacking in force. This is it, Dakota. The moment the prophecy warned us about. Are you ready?" Dakota hesitated for a split second, Sarah's warnings fresh in his mind. But as the sounds of fighting grew closer, he pushed his doubts aside. Whatever the truth, his new family was in danger. He had to act. With a nod to Maska, Dakota let the change take him. Golden fur rippled across his body as he dropped to all fours, a powerful wolf ready for battle. Together, he and Maska raced towards the entrance of the den, ready to meet the threat head-on. As they rounded the final corner, Dakota skidded to a halt in shock. The scene before him was not what he expected. Instead of a pack of golden wolves, he saw a mixed group of shifters, some with fur of gold, others of silver, and still others in human form wielding what looked like high-tech weapons. At their head stood a tall, regal woman with streaks of gray in her golden hair. Her eyes locked with Dakota's, and he felt a jolt of recognition. He had seen those eyes before, in Isling's journal. "Hello, nephew," the woman said, her voice carrying easily over the sounds of battle. "I am Isling Asina, true heir of the Noden line, and I'm here to tell you the truth about your heritage and the lies you've been fed." Dakota's world tilted on its axis once more. As Maska snarled beside him, poised to attack, Dakota realized that the real battle, the one for truth, was only just beginning. The cavern echoed with growls and the clash of metal as the two forces faced off. Dakota stood frozen between them, his mind reeling from Isling's revelation. Maska's silver form tensed beside him, ready to lunge at a moment's notice. "Don't listen to her, Dakota," Maska growled, his voice resonating in Dakota's mind. "She's trying to manipulate you, to turn you against us." Isling took a step forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight, nephew. I'm here to right a wrong that has persisted for generations. You deserve to know the truth about your lineage, about the real meaning of the prophecy." Dakota's gaze darted between Maska and Isling, his instincts torn. The wolf in him urged action to defend his pack. But the human part, the part that had always sought understanding, demanded he listen. With a deep breath, Dakota shifted back, to his human form standing tall between the two factions. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying the newfound authority of his shifted nature. "No more blood will be shed here today. I want answers from both of you." Maska's eyes widened in surprise, but after a moment's hesitation, he too returned. To human form. Isling nodded approvingly, signaling her own forces to stand down. "We'll talk," Dakota continued, "but not here. There's a neutral space, a place of power. We'll meet there and lay everything out in the open." He led them to the glowing spring where he had first achieved his full shift. As they gathered around its luminescent waters, the energy in the air was palpable, a mixture of ancient magic and modern tension. "Now," Dakota said, looking between Maska and Isling, "I want the whole story. No more half-truths or manipulations. Start from the beginning." Isling stepped forward, her eyes reflecting the ethereal glow of the spring. "The beginning," she mused, "goes back further than even most shifters know. The Noden were not just mediators, Dakota. They were guardians of a power far greater than either the rivers or the Asina fully understood." She waved her hand over the spring, and suddenly the water's surface shimmered, projecting images into the air above it. Dakota saw ancient forests, pristine and full of magic. Wolves ran through the underbrush, shifting seamlessly between human and animal forms. Our ancestors, Aisling explained, were stewards of the natural world. They understood the delicate balance between all living things, and they had the power to maintain that balance. The ability to shift was just one manifestation of their EB, connection to the Earth's energy. The images shifted, showing conflict erupting between different groups of shifters. But as human civilization expanded as the world changed, some began to see our gifts as a means to power rather than a responsibility. The Rivers clan and the Asina pack were once allies, working together to protect our kind. But greed and fear drove them apart. Maska bristled at this, stepping forward. You speak of greed, but it was the Asina who first sought to use our abilities for personal gain, to rule over humans rather than live in harmony with them. Aisling's eyes flashed. And it was the Rivers who betrayed the Nodin who sought to steal their power for themselves. Enough, Dakota interjected, feeling the tension rising again. What does this have to do with me? With the prophecy? Aisling's expression softened as she turned back to Dakota. The prophecy, dear nephew, was never about choosing sides in an age-old feud. It was about restoring balance. The Nodin bloodline, your bloodline, carries the potential to reunite what was broken, to heal the rift not just between shifter clans, but between the human world and the natural one. Maska shook his head vehemently. You twist the words to suit your own agenda. The prophecy clearly states that the one who unites the bloodlines will have the power to reshape our world. That power belongs with those who have protected our secrets, who have kept our kind safe in a world that would destroy us if they knew the truth. Dakota's mind raced, trying to reconcile these conflicting narratives with what he had learned over the past weeks. He turned to Maska, his mentor and friend, but now seen in a new light. You knew, didn't you? You knew who I really was from the beginning. Maska's silence was answer enough. Dakota felt a surge of anger and betrayal. You manipulated me, pushed me towards fulfilling your interpretation of the prophecy without ever giving me the full picture. I did what was necessary, Maska said, his voice tight. The world is changing, Dakota. Climate crisis, mass extinction, humans pushing the planet to its breaking point. Our kind needs a leader who can guide us through these challenges, who can use the old powers to protect us and the natural world we're connected to. Aisling stepped closer to Dakota, her eyes pleading. But at what cost? The Nodin understood that true balance comes not from control, but from harmony. Your power, Dakota, isn't meant to elevate shifters above others. It's meant to bridge the gap, to remind all beings of their connection to the earth and to each other. As they argued, Dakota felt a stirring in the air around them. The glow of the spring intensified, and suddenly he was assaulted by a flood of visions. He saw cities crumbling as nature reclaimed them, wolves running through overgrown streets. He saw himself standing atop a skyscraper, commanding legions of shifters as they imposed a new order on the world. He saw hidden groves where humans and shifters worked together, using ancient wisdom and modern science to heal the planet. He saw war between shifters and humans, technology clashing against primal fury. He saw himself alone in a wasteland, the last guardian of a dying world. Gasping, Dakota stumbled back from the spring. The visions faded, but their impact lingered. He understood now the true weight of the choice before him. The prophecy, he said slowly. It's not a predetermined fate. It's a crossroads. And the path I choose doesn't just affect shifters, it affects everything. Both Maska and Aisling nodded solemnly. The tension in the cavern had shifted, the earlier hostility replaced by a sense of anticipation. Dakota turned to Sarah, who had been watching the exchange silently. You knew too, didn't you? That's why you warned me. Sarah nodded, her expression a mixture of guilt and resolve. I've been working as a double agent, trying to prevent either side from gaining too much power. The balance is delicate, Dakota. No one faction should control the future of our world. Dakota took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless lives, human and shifter alike, resting on his next words. I won't be a pawn in anyone's game, he declared. Not the Rivers, not the Asina, not anyone's. The power of the Noden line doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to the earth, to all living things. He turned to address the gathered shifters, from both factions. For too long we've hidden in the shadows, seeing ourselves as separate from the human world. But we're not. We're part of it, just as we're part of the natural world. Our gift, our responsibility, is to be the bridge between them. Mosca stepped forward, his expression conflicted. And how do you propose to do that? The world isn't ready to know about us. We'd be hunted, experimented on. Not if we approach it the right way, Dakota countered. We start small. We use our abilities to help in ways that don't expose us. Environmental restoration, disaster relief, advancing sustainable technologies. We work from the shadows, yes, but towards the light. Aisling smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. A new path, forging a future that honors our past without being bound by it. It won't be easy, nephew. There will be those who resist, who cling to the old ways and old grudges. Dakota nodded, feeling a sense of purpose settling over him. Then, we start here with those willing to try. Rivers, Asina, any shifter who wants to be part of building a better world. We come together, pooling our knowledge and abilities. He turned back to the spring, its waters now calm and clear. The prophecy spoke of a choice to mend or sever. I choose to mend. Not just the rift between our clans, but the divide between all living things. It's time we remembered that we're all part of one great web of life. As Dakota's echoed through the cavern, a change came over the gathered shifters. Old enemies looked at each other with new eyes, seeing the possibility of alliance, where before there had only been enmity. Mosca was the first to step forward, extending his hand to Aisling. For the sake of our future, I'm willing to try if you are. Aisling clasped his hand, a centuries-old feud beginning to heal in that simple gesture. For Dakota, for the earth, for all our children, we try. As the two leaders began to discuss terms of cooperation, Dakota felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Sarah, a look of admiration in her eyes. You did it, she said softly. You found a third path, one that none of us saw. Dakota shook his head. This is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of trust to build, and we need to figure out how to use our abilities to make a real difference in the world without exposing ourselves. Sarah's smile was determined. Well, you've got the best of both packs ready to help, and don't forget, I've got connections in the human world that could be very useful. As they began to plan their next steps, Dakota felt a surge of energy coursing through him. It wasn't just his own power, but something greater. The combined hope and determination of all those gathered. For the first time, he fully understood his role in the prophecy. He wasn't meant to be a ruler or a weapon, but a catalyst for change, a spark to ignite a movement. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and dangers. But as Dakota looked around at the unlikely allies now working together, he felt a sense of optimism. They had taken the first step towards healing ancient wounds and forging a new future. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as guardians of balance, protectors of the earth, and bridge builders between worlds. As the meeting in the grotto wound down, plans being made and alliances formed, Dakota slipped away for a moment of quiet reflection. He found himself back at the edge of the glowing spring, its waters now serene and mirror-like. Gazing into its depths, he saw not just his own reflection, but echoes of all those who had come before him. Noden shamans, Rivers alphas, Asina leaders. Their hopes, their fears, their wisdom seemed to flow through him. And with that came a profound understanding of the responsibility he now carried. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the real work was just beginning. Dakota knew that the path he had chosen would not be easy. There would be resistance, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. With the combined strength of the shifter clans and the untapped potential of collaboration with the human world, there was hope for a future where all living things could thrive in harmony. As he turned to rejoin the others, ready to take the first steps on this new journey, Dakota felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks following the confrontation, in the grotto, were a whirlwind of activity. The underground den, once the exclusive domain of the Rivers clan, now bustled with a diverse mix of shifters from both packs. The air hummed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as age-old enemies learned to work side by side. Dakota found himself at the center of it all, mediating disputes, fostering cooperation, and helping to shape the vision of their new alliance. It was exhausting work, but exhilarating too. Every small victory, every moment of understanding between former rivals, felt like a step towards fulfilling the true meaning of the prophecy. One morning, as Dakota pored over maps and reports in what had become their makeshift war room, Maska entered with a grave expression. "We've got a situation," the silver-haired alpha said, his voice low. "A logging company is moving into sacred, shifter territory in the Pacific Northwest. Old-growth forest, home to one of the oldest and most secretive packs in North America." Dakota frowned, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. "Have they reached out for help?" Maska shook his head. "They're isolationists, barely in contact with other shifters, let alone humans. But if those trees fall..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew the devastation it would cause, not just to the ecosystem, but to the ancient magic that permeated such places. "We need to act," Dakota said, rising from his chair. "But carefully. We can't expose ourselves, and we need to respect the territory of the local pack." Aisling, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped in. "I might have a solution. My contacts in the environmental law sector have been looking for a case like this. If we can provide them with the right information, they could tie the logging company up in legal battles for years." Dakota nodded appreciatively. This was exactly the kind of collaborative approach they'd been working towards. "Good, but we need to do more than just delay. We need to find a way to protect the land permanently." Sarah, who seemed to have a knack for appearing just when needed, joined the conversation. "What if we approach this from multiple angles? Legal action to buy us time, discreet eco-activism to raise public awareness, and behind the scenes, we use our abilities to make the land less appealing for logging." The room buzzed with energy as they began to plan. Dakota felt a surge of pride as he watched shifters from both packs offering ideas, building on each other's suggestions. This was what he had hoped for, unity in the face of a common goal. As the strategy took shape, Dakota knew he had to be on the ground for this one. "I'll lead a small team to the Pacific Northwest," he announced. "We'll coordinate with Aisling's legal team and Sarah's activists, and try to make contact with the local pack. They need to know they're not alone in this fight." Maska looked like he wanted to object but held his tongue. Instead, he said, "Be careful out there. Remember, not everyone will welcome this new approach. There are still those who believe exposure of any kind is too great a risk." Dakota nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Change never came easily, especially to those who had lived in secrecy for generations. The journey to the Pacific Northwest was a test of their new alliance. Dakota's team consisted of members from both the Rivers and Asina packs, each bringing unique skills and perspectives. As they trekked through the lush primeval forest, Dakota felt the power of the land thrumming through him. This was old magic, deep and wild. Their first challenge came not from loggers or hostile shifters, but from the forest itself. As they neared the heart of the contested territory, the trees seemed to close in around them. Paths disappeared, compasses spun wildly, and an oppressive fog descended. "The land is protecting itself," Elena, an Asina shaman, whispered. "It doesn't recognize us as allies yet." Dakota closed his eyes, reaching out with his Nodin senses. He felt the ancient heartbeat of the forest, its fear and its defiance. Slowly, reverently, he began to speak in a language he didn't know he remembered. The old tongue of the Nodin, words of peace and kinship with the land. The fog began to lift, and a path appeared before them. As they followed it, Dakota caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, the local pack, watching warily but no longer actively hindering their progress. They emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive gnarled cedar tree. Its trunk was wider than a house, its branches reaching towards the sky like outstretched arms. At its base stood a woman, her silver hair wild and adorned with feathers and bones. Her eyes, when she turned to face them, were the deep green of the forest itself. "I am Wachiwi," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Speaker for the Twilight Pack and guardian of this forest. Why have you come to our lands, bringing the scent of the outside world with you?" Dakota stepped forward, bowing his head in respect. "We come as allies, Wachiwi. The world beyond your borders threatens this sacred place, and we offer our help in protecting it." Wachiwi's eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust you? The outside packs have ignored us for generations, content to let us fade into legend. Because the time for isolation is over," Dakota said, his voice firm but compassionate. "The human world encroaches further every day. If we don't stand together, we'll all fall separately." He went on to explain the changes happening in the Shifter world, the new alliance forming, and their plans to protect the forest through both human and shifter means. As he spoke, he felt the energy of the great cedar tree pulsing, as if listening and judging his words. Wachiwi was silent for a long moment after Dakota finished. Then, to everyone's surprise, she laughed, a sound like wind through leaves. The Old One spoke of a time when the divided would be united, when the bridge between worlds would be rebuilt. It seems that time has come. She gestured for them to follow her deeper into the forest. As they walked, Dakota and his team shared more detailed plans. Wachiwi listened intently, occasionally offering insights into the land's hidden defenses and the unique flora and fauna that called this forest home. "Your legal battles and activism will buy us time," she said as they reached a hidden grove filled with bioluminescent plants. "But the true protection of this land must come from within. The loggers must be made to see, to feel the life that thrums through every tree and stone." Dakota nodded, an idea forming. What if we could show them? Not just the loggers, but the world. The true magic of this place, in a way that inspires awe and protection rather than fear or greed. Over the next few days, a plan took shape. While Iceling's legal team tied the logging company up in court, and Sarah's activists rallied public support, Dakota and the Twilight Pack worked on something unprecedented. Using a combination of shifter abilities and cutting-edge technology, provided by Sarah's contacts, they began to create a virtual experience like no other. Visitors would be able to walk through a digital twin of the forest, feeling its energy, hearing its stories, connecting with its spirit in a way that no ordinary nature documentary could match. But the true magic lay in what couldn't be seen through a screen. Dakota and Wachiwi, working with shamans from both their packs, wove subtle enchantments into the program. Anyone who experienced it would carry a piece of the forest's essence with them, fostering a deep, almost primal need to protect such places. As the project neared completion, Dakota stood with Wachiwi at the base of the Great Cedar. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once it's released, there's no going back. The world will know that there's something special about this forest, even if they don't understand exactly what." Wachiwi's smile was both sad and hopeful. "Change comes whether we will it or not, young guardian. Better to shape it than to be swept away by it. Our people have been stewards of this land for millennia. Perhaps now it's time for us to become its teachers as well." The release of the virtual forest experience was more successful than any of them could have imagined. It went viral almost instantly, capturing the public imagination and sparking a global conversation about the importance of old-growth forests. The logging company, faced with unprecedented public scrutiny and legal challenges, announced that they were abandoning their plans and instead donating the land for conservation. It was a massive victory, but Dakota knew it was just the beginning. As he prepared to return to New York, Dakota stood once more in the hidden grove with Wachiwi. The old shaman looked at him with newfound respect. "You've done well, bridge builder, but this is just the first step on a long journey." Dakota nodded, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. There are other forests, other sacred places that need protection, and beyond that, the greater challenge of healing the rift between the natural world and human society. Wachiwi placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. "Remember, young one, true change comes not from imposing our will, but from opening eyes and hearts. You've shown that it's possible. Now, The real work begins. As Dakota and his team said their goodbyes, preparing for the journey home, he felt a shift in the energy around him. The forest, which had been wary of their presence at first, now seemed to embrace them. Paths opened up easily before them, and more than once Dakota caught glimpses of Twilight Pack members watching from the shadows. Not with suspicion now, but with gratitude and something like hope. The flight back to New York gave Dakota time to reflect on all that had happened. They had achieved something remarkable, yes, but it had also exposed the challenges ahead. Not every situation could be resolved so peacefully. Not every shifter pack would be as willing to adapt as the Twilight Pack had been. As the plane began its descent into JFK, Dakota's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Major breakthrough in clean energy tech. CEO wants to meet. Says he has a proposition that could change everything. But there are rumors of corporate espionage and darker forces at play. We need to move fast. Dakota smiled to himself. One adventure ended, another began. The path of the bridge builder was never going to be an easy one, but as the city lights came into view below, he felt ready for whatever came next. Little did he know that the shadows gathering at the edges of his vision were more than just the approaching night. Forces older and darker than anything he had yet encountered were stirring, drawn by the power he wielded and the changes he sought to make. The true test of the prophecy was only just beginning. The New York skyline glittered in the early morning light as Dakota made his way to the headquarters of Helios Innovations. The clean energy breakthrough Sarah had mentioned had sent shockwaves through both the scientific and business communities. If the claims were true, it could revolutionize sustainable power generation on a global scale. As he entered the sleek, eco-friendly building, Dakota couldn't shake a feeling of unease. His heightened shifter senses picked up an undercurrent of tension among the employees, whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when others approached, furtive glances, and an overall atmosphere of suspicion. Sarah met him in the lobby, her usual composed demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. "Thanks for coming so quickly," she said, leading him to a private elevator. "Dr. Alara Chen, the lead scientist behind the breakthrough, has gone missing. The CEO, Vincent Drake, is frantic. He's convinced corporate spies have taken her, but there's something off about the whole situation." The elevator whisked them to the top floor, opening into a minimalist office with panoramic views of the city. Vincent Drake, a man whose youthful appearance belied his 50 years, rose to greet them. His handshake was firm, but Dakota noticed a slight tremor. "Mr. Stone, Ms. Chen, thank you for coming," Drake said, gesturing for them to sit. "I assume Sarah has briefed you on the situation?" Dakota nodded, studying the CEO carefully. There was fear in the man's eyes, but also something else, a hunger that set Dakota's instincts on edge. "Why don't you tell me your version of events, Mr. Drake? Sometimes details get lost in retelling." Drake launched into an explanation of their breakthrough, a new type of fusion reactor that promised clean, nearly limitless energy. Dr. Chen had been the driving force behind the project, a brilliant physicist with a unique insight into quantum mechanics. "And then 3 days ago she simply vanished," Drake finished, running a hand through his hair. No note, no signs of struggle, just gone. Along with all her research notes and prototype designs. "Have you contacted the authorities?" Dakota asked, though he already suspected the answer. Drake's expression tightened. "We can't. The nature of our work, let's just say it exists in a gray area of international law. If word got out about what we've achieved and what we've lost, the consequences would be catastrophic." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "So why come to us? Surely a company of your size has resources to handle this internally." A flicker of something, desperation, guilt, crossed Drake's face. "Because this goes beyond corporate espionage. The night before Alara disappeared, she came to me, babbling about energy signatures she couldn't explain, about the reactor tapping into something unnatural." He took a deep breath. "She mentioned things that sounded like, well, magic." Dakota and Sarah exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of situation they'd been preparing for. the intersection of advanced technology and the hidden world of shifters and old magic. "Mr. Drake," Dakota said carefully, "what exactly do you know about the unusual aspects of our world?" Drake's laugh was hollow. "A week ago, I would have said such things were impossible. Now," he shook his head, "I've seen things in the data Alara left behind that defy conventional explanation. I think whatever she tapped into, whatever power source this reactor is using, it's not just revolutionary, it's dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic." As they delved deeper into the details of the project and Dr. Chen's disappearance, Dakota's unease grew. The energy signatures Drake described were eerily similar to the ancient power that flowed through shifter sacred sites. Had Dr. Chen inadvertently created a way to harness that energy on an industrial scale? "We need to see the lab," Dakota said finally. "And we'll need access to all of Dr. Chen's research, even the classified parts." Drake hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." The laboratory was a marvel of modern science, filled with equipment that looked more at home in a science fiction movie than a corporate R&D department. But what caught Dakota's attention immediately was the prototype reactor in the center of the room. Even powered down, it seemed to pulse with an energy he recognized, the same deep, primal force he'd felt in the old growth forest. As Sarah began examining the computer systems, looking for any clues to Dr. Chen's disappearance, Dakota approached the reactor. His hand hovered over its surface, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the power radiating from within. Suddenly, a jolt of energy surged through him. The world around him faded, replaced by a series of rapid-fire visions. Dr. Chen, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror, standing before the activated reactor as it pulsed with otherworldly light. A shadowy figure, its form shifting and indistinct, reaching out to her through the energy field. A hidden chamber, deep beneath the city, where ancient symbols carved into stone pulsed with the same energy as the reactor. A gathering of robed figures, their faces hidden, chanting in a language that made Dakota's blood run cold. With a gasp, Dakota snapped back to the present. He found himself on his knees, Sarah and Drake looking at him with concern. "What happened?" Sarah asked, helping him to his feet. "You went rigid and your eyes, they were glowing." Dakota shook his head, trying to clear the lingering images. I'm not sure, but I think I know what happened to Dr. Chen. And it's worse than we imagined." Over the next hour, Dakota explained his visions, careful to frame them in terms of intuitions and hunches for Drake's benefit. As he spoke, he could see the color draining from the CEO's face. "You're saying," Drake said slowly, "that our reactor somehow tapped into an energy source that some kind of cult is interested in? And they've taken Alara?" Sarah, who had been quietly working on Dr. Chen's computer, suddenly sat up straight. "I think I've found something," she said. "There's a hidden folder here, encrypted. Give me a few minutes." As Sarah worked her technical magic, Dakota pulled Drake aside. "Mr. Drake, I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever heard of an organization called the Crimson Dawn?" Drake's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. "How do you know that name?" he whispered. "Let's just say we've had run-ins with them before," Dakota said grimly. The Crimson Dawn was a secret society that had long sought to exploit the power of the shifter world for their own gain. If they were involved, the situation was even more dire than he'd feared. Before Drake could respond, Sarah called them over. "I've cracked the encryption," she said, her voice tense. "You need to see this." The screen filled with diagrams, equations, and hurriedly typed notes. Dr. Chen's brilliant mind was on full display, connecting dots that should have been impossible to link. She had realized that the energy her reactor was tapping into was the same force that flowed through ley lines, the ancient pathways of natural magic that crisscrossed the earth. But it was the final entry that chilled Dakota to the bone. "They're coming. I can feel them watching, waiting. The power we've unleashed, it's drawn their attention. I thought I was pushing the boundaries of science, but I've stumbled into something far older and more dangerous. If you're reading this, I've probably been taken." Don't trust Drake. He knows more than he's saying. The Crimson Dawn has plans for this technology, plans that could tear the veil between worlds. Find me, stop them, before it's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. Dakota turned to Drake, his eyes hard. I think it's time you told us everything you know, Mr. Drake, starting with your connection to the Crimson Dawn. Drake's shoulders sagged, the weight of his secrets finally becoming too much to bear. I never wanted it to go this far, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They approached me years ago, offered funding and resources beyond anything I could have dreamed of. All they wanted in return was access to certain unconventional research avenues. As Drake's confession spilled out, a complex web of deceit and manipulation came to light. The Crimson Dawn had been guiding Helios innovations from the shadows, pushing them towards the discovery of how to harness ley line energy. Dr. Chen's breakthrough had been the final piece of a plan centuries in the making. Where would they have taken her? Dakota pressed, his mind already racing through possible scenarios and countermoves. Drake shook his head. I don't know. They have facilities all over the world, hidden places where the boundary between realms is thin. But he hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. There's a gathering happening soon. The leaders of the Crimson Dawn, coming together to witness the culmination of their work. If Alara is anywhere, she'll be there. Sarah, who had been silently taking in all this information, finally spoke up. We're going to need backup. This is bigger than anything we've faced before. Dakota nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll contact Maska and Aisling. We'll need both packs for this. And he paused, a new idea forming. We need to reach out to the Twilight Pack and any other shifter groups willing to help. This isn't just about stopping the Crimson Dawn anymore. It's about protecting the very balance between our world and the hidden realms. As they began to formulate a plan, Dakota couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. The prophecy had spoken of a choice that would decide the fate of worlds. Perhaps this was what it had meant all along. Outside the windows of Helios Innovations, storm clouds began to gather, as if the very sky could sense the battle that was brewing. Dakota knew that the coming days would test him and his allies in ways they had never been tested before. The fate of both the human and shifter worlds hung in the balance, and somewhere out there, in a hidden place where science and magic blurred together, Dr. Alara Chen waited, either the key to averting disaster or the unwitting catalyst for a catastrophe beyond imagining. The pieces were set. The final game was about to begin. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Dakota's call to arms spread through the shifter community like wildfire, igniting both hope and fear. The response was unprecedented. Packs that had been isolated for generations emerged from hiding, drawn by the urgency of Dakota's message. The underground den, once the exclusive domain of the Rivers clan, now buzzed with a diversity of shifters from across the globe. Maska and Aisling worked tirelessly to coordinate the influx, their former rivalry set aside in the face of a common threat. Dakota found himself at the center of it all, a living embodiment of the prophecy that had brought them together. As he moved through the crowded caverns, he could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders. Every pair of eyes that turned to him held a mixture of hope and uncertainty. In a makeshift war room, Dakota huddled with his core team. Sarah's fingers flew over her keyboard, sifting through the mountain of data they'd extracted from Helios Innovations. Maska and Aisling pored over ancient maps, trying to identify potential locations for the Crimson Dawn's gathering. We've narrowed it down to 3 possible sites, Aisling reported, her voice tense. All of them are at the intersection of major ley lines, places where the veil between worlds is naturally thin. Maska pointed to the map. The first is in the Carpathian Mountains, an old stronghold of European shifter clans. The second is deep in the Amazon rainforest, in ruins that predate known history. And the third... He hesitated, his expression grim. The third is here, Dakota finished, his finger landing on a spot in the middle of New York Harbor. Liberty Island. Sarah looked up from her computer, her eyes wide. The Statue of Liberty, but that's impossible. It's one of the most monitored places in the country. which makes it the perfect hiding place, a new voice interjected. Wachiwi, the elder of the Twilight Pack, emerged from the shadows. Her arrival had caused quite a stir. Many thought her pack was merely a legend. The Crimson Dawn has always hidden in plain sight, using humanity's disbelief in magic as their greatest shield. Dakota nodded, feeling the pieces click into place. It makes sense. The statue itself is a powerful symbol of freedom and hope. If the Crimson Dawn could corrupt that energy, harness it for their ritual, the consequences would be catastrophic, Wachiwi finished. The veil between worlds would not just be thinned but torn asunder. The gravity of the situation settled over the room. This wasn't just about saving Dr. Chen or stopping a single organization. The very fabric of reality was at stake. We need to split our forces, Dakota said, his mind racing through strategies. We can't risk being wrong about the location. Mosca, can you lead a team to the Carpathians? The silver-haired alpha nodded grimly. I have contacts among the old European clans. We'll be ready. Aisling, take a group to the Amazon. Your knowledge of ancient magics might be crucial if that turns out to be the site. Agreed, Aisling said. I'll bring some of our best trackers and shamans. Dakota turned to Wachiwi. I hate to ask this of you, but we need your wisdom and power here in New York. Will you stand with us? The old shaman's eyes glittered with an inner fire. Young bridge builder, this is the moment my people have prepared for through countless generations. We will not falter now. As the others left to prepare their teams, Sarah pulled Dakota aside. There's something else you need to see, she said, her voice low. She pulled up a series of documents on her screen, internal memos, and research notes from Helios Innovations. Dr. Chen's breakthrough wasn't just about harnessing ley line energy, Sarah explained. She found a way to manipulate it, to potentially create new ley lines or redirect existing ones. Dakota felt a chill run down his spine. If the Crimson Dawn gets hold of that technology, they could reshape the entire energy flow of the planet, Sarah finished. Imagine being able to cut off entire regions from magical energy or flood cities with more power than they could handle. It would be like controlling the world's power grid, but on a metaphysical level. The implications were staggering. No wonder the Crimson Dawn had gone to such lengths to acquire Dr. Chen and her research. This wasn't just about breaking down the barriers between worlds. It was about controlling both realms. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Dakota felt a moment of doubt. The task before them seemed impossible. How could they hope to stop an organization that had been planning this for centuries? But then he looked around at the gathered shifters, former enemies working side by side, ancient packs emerging from seclusion, all united in a common cause. This, he realized, was the true power of the prophecy, not just his own abilities, but the unity and strength that came from bringing their fragmented world together. With renewed determination, Dakota began to outline their plan of attack. They had less than 24 hours before the Crimson Dawn's ritual was set to begin. Every second counted. As night fell over New York, 3 teams set out on their missions. Mosca's group headed for the airport, bound for Europe. Aisling and her team slipped away to a private airfield, their destination the heart of the Amazon. And Dakota, along with Sarah, Wachiwi, and a select group of their most skilled operatives, made their way towards Liberty Island. The boat ride across the harbor was tense, the lights of the city reflecting off the dark water. Dakota stood at the bow, his senses on high alert. As they approached the island, he could feel the wrongness in the air, a sickly twist in the natural flow of energy. They've already started the preliminary rituals, Wachiwi murmured, her aged face creased with concern. We must hurry. As they docked, Dakota was struck by how normal everything appeared. Tourists milled about, snapping photos and admiring the iconic statue. But to his shifter senses, it was as if a veil had been pulled back. He could see the shadowy figures moving among the crowds, their eyes gleaming with unnatural light. Remember, Dakota said to his team, our priority is to find Dr. Chen and shut down whatever device they're using to amplify the ley line energy. We avoid confrontation if possible. The last thing we need is to cause a panic. They split into smaller groups, moving through the crowds with practiced ease. Sarah hacked into the island's security systems, giving them eyes and ears throughout the complex. As they searched, Dakota felt the wrongness growing stronger, culminating in a spot beneath the statue itself. "There," he whispered, indicating a maintenance door that tourists never noticed. "That's our way in." As they approached, two guards materialized from the shadows. Their eyes flickered with an inner fire that marked them as something more than human. Before Dakota could react, Wachiwi stepped forward, her hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. The guards' eyes glazed over, and they stepped aside, unseeing. "An illusion," Wachiwi explained as they slipped past. "But it won't last long. We must hurry." The maintenance tunnels beneath Liberty Island were a maze of narrow corridors and rusted pipes, but as they descended deeper, the mundane gave way to the mystical. Ancient symbols glowed on the walls, pulsing with eldritch energy. The air grew thick with the scent of incense and ozone. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A massive device dominated the center of the room, its design a twisted blend of advanced technology and arcane symbolism. Arcs of energy crackled between crystalline spires, and at its heart, a swirling vortex of power was beginning to form. Dr. Alara Chen was there, her hands moving over control panels, with frantic energy, but her eyes were blank, unseeing. Next to her stood a figure that made Dakota's blood run cold, Vincent Drake, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "Ah, the prophesized one arrives," Drake said, his voice carrying easily over the hum of machinery. "I was wondering when you'd join us. You're just in time for the grand finale." Dakota stepped forward, his body tensed for action. "It's over, Drake. Whatever you're planning, it ends now." Drake's laugh was chilling. "Oh, but it's only just beginning. Do you have any idea what true power is, Dakota Stone? It's not just the ability to shift your form or commune with nature. It's the power to reshape reality itself." As he spoke, the vortex of energy began to expand. Through its swirling depths, Dakota caught glimpses of other worlds, realms of pure magic, of ancient beings and forgotten gods. "The barriers between worlds are falling," Wachiwi gasped, her voice filled with horror. "If that portal fully opens, then the Crimson Dawn will stand as rulers of not just this world, but all worlds," Drake finished. "We will harness energies your kind can only dream of, and it's all thanks to the brilliant Dr. Chen here." He patted Alara's shoulder possessively. Dakota's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and time was running out. But as he looked at his team, Sarah with her technological prowess, Wachiwi with her ancient wisdom, and the diverse group of shifters ready to fight for their world, he knew they still had a chance. "You're wrong, Drake," Dakota said, his voice carrying the weight of the prophecy. "True power doesn't come from domination. It comes from balance, from unity." He turned to his team. "Remember why we're here. Not just to stop them, but to protect both our worlds. Together, we are stronger than any force they can unleash." As if in response to his words, the air around them began to shimmer. Dakota felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd experienced before. It was as if every shifter, every guardian of the natural world was lending him their strength. The final battle for the fate of both worlds was about to begin. And as Dakota prepared to face the full might of the Crimson Dawn, he knew that whatever the outcome, nothing would ever be the same again. The chamber erupted into chaos as Dakota and his team sprang into action. Sarah darted towards the control panels, her fingers flying over keys as she attempted to disrupt the Crimson Dawn systems. Wachiwi began an ancient chant, her voice rising above the crackle of energy, weaving a protective barrier around them. Dakota faced Drake, the two circling each other like alpha wolves. "You don't understand what you're doing," Dakota pleaded, even as he prepared for combat. "The balance between worlds isn't meant to be broken. You'll destroy everything, including yourselves." Drake's laugh was hollow, tinged with madness. "Destroy? No, we'll remake it all in our image. A new order, with the Crimson Dawn at its apex." His form began to shift, but not into any natural animal. Instead, his body twisted and elongated, becoming a chimera of different beasts, the result of forbidden rituals and corrupted shifter magic. As Drake lunged, Dakota embraced his own transformation. Golden fur rippled across his skin as he met the attack head-on. The two crashed together in a fury of claws and fangs, their battle a blur of primal fury and calculated strategy. Into them, the chamber became a war zone. Crimson Dawn acolytes poured in from hidden passages, clashing with Dakota's team. The air filled with snarls, the crack of gunfire, and the sizzle of both technological and magical energies. Sarah reached Dr. Chen, frantically trying to break whatever hold the Crimson Dawn had over her. "Ilara, can you hear me? We need to shut this down." For a moment, clarity seemed to flicker in the scientist's eyes. "The resonance," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. "Disrupt. The resonance." Before Sarah could decipher her meaning, she was forced to duck as an energy blast scorched the air above her head. One of the Crimson Tabi Dawn's technomages advanced, his augmented body crackling with stolen leyline energy. Wachiwi's protective barrier shimmered as it deflected attacks, but the old shaman was visibly straining. "The veil grows thinner," she called out, her voice tight with exertion. "We don't have much time." Dakota heard her warning even as he grappled with Drake's monstrous form. He could feel it too, the wrongness in the air growing stronger, reality itself seeming to warp around the edges. Through the expanding portal, glimpses of other realms flashed by in a dizzying kaleidoscope. Mythical creatures began to slip through the gaps, shadowhounds with glowing red eyes, ethereal spirits that wailed with the voices of the damned, even stranger entities that defied description. The battle was no longer just against the Crimson Dawn, but against the very forces of chaos they had unleashed. As Dakota fought, he felt a strange resonance building within him. The prophecy, the power of his Noden bloodline, the energy of the ley lines, it all seemed to converge, filling him with a strength and clarity he'd never known before. In a burst of golden light, Dakota threw Drake back. The chimera crashed into the central device, causing it to spark and stutter. In that moment of reprieve, Dakota's voice rang out, carrying a power that made everyone, shifter, human, and otherworldly being alike, pause. "Enough!" The single word echoed with the force of a thunderclap. Dakota stood tall, his form seeming to flicker between human, wolf, and something more, a being of pure energy and primal force. "This ends now," he continued, his voice resonating with the very fabric of reality. The veil between worlds was never meant to be a wall, but a bridge, not to be torn down, but to be understood and respected. As he spoke, the chaotic energies in the room began to shift. The swirling vortex of the portal started to stabilize, its wild fluctuations smoothing out into a more controlled flow. The creatures that had slipped through found themselves gently but firmly guided back to their own realms. Drake struggled to his feet, his chimera form flickering as he fought to maintain it. "No!" he roared. "We were so close. The power was within our grasp." Dakota turned to him, his eyes glowing with an inner light. "You never understood true power, Drake. It's not about control or domination. It's about balance, about harmony between all things." With a gesture, Dakota reached out to the ley line energies that the Crimson Dawn had been manipulating. But instead of trying to shut them down or redirect them, he began to weave them into a new pattern. The symbols on the walls, the advanced technology, even the Statue of Liberty far above them, all of it began to pulse in a synchronized rhythm. "Sarah," Dakota called out, his voice strained with effort. "The resonance. We need to align it all." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. She turned back to the control panels, her hands moving with newfound purpose. "Dr. Chen," she said urgently, "help me calibrate this. We can use the Crimson Dawn's own device to stabilize the veil." Ilara Chen blinked, the last of the mind control falling away as she grasped the magnitude of what was happening. Without a word, she joined Sarah, the two women working in perfect synchronization to realign the energies. Wachiwi added her own magic to the mix, her ancient chants blending with the hum of technology and the pulse of the ley lines. The other shifters, sensing the tide turning, lent their own energies to Takoda's efforts. As the new pattern took hold, the very air seemed to sing. The portal, once a chaotic maelstrom, transformed into a shimmering curtain of light. Through it, Takoda could see glimpses of other worlds, but no longer as places to be conquered. Instead, he saw the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate balance that held the multiverse together. Drake, seeing his plans crumbling around him, made one last desperate lunge for the portal. "If I can't rule it," he snarled, "I'll destroy it all." But before he could reach it, a golden wolf intercepted him. Aisling, having returned from her mission just in time, tackled Drake to the ground. "It's over," she growled. "Your dawn has turned to dusk." As the last of the Crimson Dawn's forces were subdued, Takoda felt the energy he had been channeling begin to stabilize. The veil, between worlds rather than being torn apart, had been transformed. It was still a barrier, but now it was also a connection, a living, breathing membrane that allowed the energies of different realms to flow in harmony. Exhausted but triumphant, Takoda turned to his team. Sarah and Dr. Chen were slumped over the control panels, drained but smiling. Wachiwi stood tall, her eyes shining with pride and wonder. The other shifters gathered around, their faces a mix of awe and relief. What did we just do?" one of the younger pack members asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Takoda took a deep breath, feeling the new rhythm of the world settling into place. "We fulfilled the prophecy," he said softly, "but not in the way anyone expected. We didn't just stop the Crimson Dawn. We've changed the very nature of how our world interacts with others." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific mind already racing with the implications. "The resonance pattern we've established," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "It's not just stabilizing the veil, it's creating a sustainable energy exchange between realms. Do you realize what this means?" Sarah nodded, catching on quickly. "Clean, limitless energy. But more than that. A way to communicate, to learn, to grow, not by conquering other worlds but by cooperating with them." Wachiwi's aged face creased in a smile. "The old stories speak of a time when the boundaries between worlds were not so rigid, when wisdom and magic flowed freely between realms. Perhaps we have not just saved our world, but returned it to a more natural state." As the group began to discuss the ramifications of what had occurred, Takoda felt a tug on his consciousness. Turning back to the shimmering portal, he saw figures beginning to take shape within it. But these were not the chaotic entities from before. These were beings of light and wisdom, representatives from other realms, drawn by the monumental shift in the cosmic balance. One of the figures stepped forward, its form shimmering between different aspects, at times appearing as a majestic elk, then as a towering tree, then as a being of pure starlight. When it spoke, its voice seemed to bypass Takoda's ears and resonate directly within his mind. "Takoda Stone," it said, its tone carrying both gravity and warmth. "Bridge builder, fulfiller of prophecies. You and your kind have done what we had long thought impossible. You've reforged the ancient bonds between worlds, not through conquest or subjugation, but through understanding and harmony." Takoda bowed his head, humbled by the being's presence. "We only did what was necessary to protect our world," he said. "We didn't realize the full implications of our actions." The being's laughter was like the chiming of crystal bells. "Few ever do when they're making history, but know this, what you've done here today will ripple across realities. The age of isolation is ending. A new era of cooperation and shared wisdom is dawning." As the being spoke, Takoda became aware of other presences, spirits of nature, guardians of other worlds, ancient entities that defied description. All of them radiated a sense of cautious optimism, of new possibilities unfolding. "There will be challenges ahead," the luminous being continued. "Maintaining this new balance will require constant effort and vigilance. There are those in all realms who would seek to exploit these new connections. But you have proven that unity is possible, that the barriers of mistrust and fear can be overcome." Takoda nodded, feeling the weight of this new responsibility settling on his shoulders. But as he looked around at his team, at the diverse group of shifters, At Sarah and Dr. Chen representing the best of human ingenuity, at Wachiwi with her ancient wisdom, he knew they were equal to the task. "We're ready," Dakota said, his voice firm with conviction. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together, not just as shifters or humans, but as guardians of a greater balance." As the luminous beings retreated, their approval radiating like a warm breeze, Dakota turned, back to his team. The battle was over, but their work was just beginning. They had a new world to build, one where the boundaries between science and magic, between human and shifter, between one realm and the next, were no longer lines of division, but bridges of understanding. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but in a way no one could have predicted. And as the first light of a new dawn began to filter through the windows of Liberty Island, Dakota knew that the greatest adventure of all was just beginning. The weeks following the events at Liberty Island were a whirlwind of activity, negotiation, and adaptation. The world, both seen and unseen, was forever changed, and everyone was scrambling to understand and adjust to the new reality. Dakota found himself at the center of it all, a bridge not just between shifters and humans, but between entire realms. The responsibility was enormous, but he was not alone in bearing it. 1 month after the fateful night, Dakota stood on the balcony of a newly constructed building in upstate New York. The Harmony Institute, as it had been dubbed, was a marvel of both architecture and metaphysics. Its spires reached towards the sky, designed to channel and harmonize the energies flowing through the reinvigorated ley lines. At its heart was a scaled-down version of the device from Liberty Island, now refined and perfected by Dr. Chen and her team of scientists and mages. Sarah joined him on the balcony, tablet in hand as always. "The first inter-realm conference is set to begin in an hour," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Representatives from 12 different realms have confirmed their attendance. Are you ready for this?" Dakota took a deep breath, gazing out at the lush grounds of the Institute. Shifters from various packs roamed freely, some in human form, others as wolves or other animals. Human scientists worked alongside shamans and druids, their combined knowledge pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. "As ready as I'll ever be," Dakota replied with a small smile. "How are our other projects progressing?" Sarah swiped through screens on her tablet. "The Clean Energy Initiative is exceeding all expectations. Dr. Chen's refinements to the ley line tapping process have made it possible to power entire cities without any negative environmental impact. We're in talks with governments around the world to implement the technology." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "There have been incidents, though. Some groups are resistant to the changes, fearful of the unknown. We've had reports of attacks on newly established harmonic nodes in several countries." Dakota nodded grimly. They had expected resistance. Change, especially on this scale, never came easily. "And our response teams? Mosca and Aisling are coordinating efforts globally. The alliance between packs is holding strong. They're not just defending the nodes, but working to educate and integrate local communities." A soft chime interrupted them, and Wachiwi's voice came through the communication system. "Dakota, Sarah, it's time. Our guests are arriving." They made their way to the grand conference room, a circular chamber whose domed ceiling was a perfect replica of the night sky, stars shifting and swirling in real-time correspondence with the cosmic energies flowing through the building. As they entered, Dakota felt a shift in the air, a subtle change in the fabric of reality. Shimmering portals began to appear around the room, each one a window into a different realm. The beings that stepped through defied easy description. There were entities of pure light, their forms constantly shifting. Creatures that seemed to be living embodiments of natural forces, a being of living flame, another whose body was composed of swirling water and mist. Humanoid figures with features that hinted at both animal and plant ancestry. Even more alien intelligences, their forms barely comprehensible to human or shifter eyes. At the center of it all stood the luminous being Dakota had first encountered at Liberty Island. It nodded in greeting, its starlight form casting soft illumination across the chamber. "Dakota Stone," it said, its voice resonating in the minds of all present. You have called, and we have answered. Let the first Council of Realms commence. For the next several hours, Dakota found himself mediating discussions that spanned topics he could barely comprehend. The representative spoke of cosmic balances, of energies that flowed between worlds, of ancient pacts and new possibilities. Dr. Chen presented findings on the harmonization process, explaining how the controlled flow of energy between realms could benefit all. Sarah outlined plans for knowledge exchange programs, ways to share wisdom and technology across dimensional boundaries. There were tense moments as some representatives expressed concerns about increased contact between worlds. Ages-old conflicts and mistrust didn't disappear overnight. But Dakota was heartened to see genuine effort from all sides to find common ground. As the conference drew to a close, the luminous being addressed the gathered representatives once more. What has begun here today marks a turning point in the history of not just one world, but many. The path ahead is uncertain, filled with both great promise and potential peril. But if we continue in the spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding, demonstrated here, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. The being turned to Dakota. You and your kind have been given a great gift, but also a great responsibility. You stand at the crossroads of realities. Guide wisely, bridge builder. As the representatives began to depart, returning to their own realms, Dakota felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The magnitude of what they were undertaking was staggering, but the potential for positive change was equally immense. Later that evening, Dakota gathered with his core team in a more informal setting. Masca and Aisling had returned from their global coordination efforts. Wachiwi sat in a comfortable armchair, her aged eyes twinkling with a renewed spark of life. Dr. Chen was excitedly discussing theoretical applications of cross-realm energies with Sarah, who was furiously taking notes. I'd say that went well, Masca said, clapping Dakota on the shoulder. Though I'm not sure I understood half of what was being said in there. Aisling chuckled. I don't think any of us did, not fully. We're in uncharted territory now. Dakota nodded, looking around at the faces of those who had become more than just allies. They were family now, bound by shared experiences and a common purpose. We've come so far, he mused. And yet, in many ways, we're just beginning. There's still so much to learn, so much to do. Wachiwi's voice, though softened by age, carried the weight of ancient wisdom. That is the way of all great journeys, young one. Each step forward reveals new horizons. The important thing is that we walk the path together, supporting each other, learning from our mistakes, and always striving to do better. As the night wore on, they shared stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. Dakota found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a brilliant but isolated scientist working on sustainable energy to the fulcrum of a prophecy that had reshaped reality itself, it was almost too much to comprehend. Yet, as he looked at the faces of his friends and allies, as he felt the pulse of the harmonized ley lines running through the building, as he sensed the newfound connections stretching across realms, Dakota knew that they were exactly where they needed to be. The challenges ahead were immense, integrating shifter society with the human world while maintaining necessary secrets, balancing the flow of knowledge and power between realms, protecting the newly established harmonic nodes from those who would seek to exploit or destroy them, guiding humanity towards a more harmonious relationship with nature and the unseen forces that shaped their world. But they had already achieved the impossible. They had brought age-old enemies together, had bridged gaps between worlds thought unbridgeable. With each passing day, more people, human and shifter alike, were joining their cause, drawn by the promise of a better future. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Dakota stepped out onto the balcony once more. The air was crisp with possibility. In the distance he could see the shimmering outline of a harmonic node, its energies pulsing in sync with the ley lines. A soft rustle behind him announced Sarah's presence. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, joining him at the railing. Dakota smiled. "Just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go. It's overwhelming sometimes." Sarah nodded. "I know what you mean. There are moments when I wake up and think this must all be some elaborate dream. She paused, her expression growing more serious. But then I remember everything we've been through, everything we've accomplished. And I know that no matter what challenges come next, we'll face them together. As if in response to her words, Dakota felt a surge of energy through the ley lines. For a moment, the veil between worlds thinned, and he caught glimpses of other realms. Lush alien landscapes, cities of crystalline spires, forests that pulsed with magic. Not places to be conquered or exploited, but partners in a grand cosmic dance. "You're right," Dakota said, his voice filled with renewed determination. "Whatever comes next, we're ready for it. Not because we have all the answers, but because we're willing to keep learning, keep growing, keep building bridges." As the sun rose fully, bathing the Harmony Institute in golden light, Dakota felt a sense of peace settle over him. The prophecy, that had once seemed like a burden, now felt like a gift, not a predetermined fate, but an opportunity to shape a better future for all. The dawn of a new era had truly begun. And Dakota Stone, once a solitary scientist, now stood at its forefront, a bridge builder, a peacemaker, a guardian of balance. Surrounded by friends and allies from across realms, he was ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. As he turned to head back inside, ready to start another day of building harmony between worlds, Dakota knew one thing with absolute certainty: the greatest adventure of all was just beginning.